Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Environmental Social Justice. Today we have our special guest, Mr. Eric Ressler. He is the founder of 𝒂𝒏𝒈, which is a social impact creative agency. So welcome to the show, Eric.
Thanks for having me on.
Good
No
morning.
problem. Good morning. And also, you and I, when we first spoke, we talked about effective communication of climate change and sustainability and how we're not doing such a great job on it. And you started this company to effectively communicate social impact. So please tell us what you're doing.
Yeah, so I'll just speak a little bit about 𝒂𝒏𝒈. So we're a social impact creative agency. So we help nonprofit clients as well as social enterprise clients and some on the funder side as well, really with more effective design and communications for social impact. And so that spans a pretty broad range of topics. Recently, we've been really focused on climate action and working with a lot of brands who are really trying to move things forward from a climate lens. And one of the first things that we've noticed as we've been looking into the space and seeing what's happening is there's so much communications and messaging that, and this is true, I think, in general for many causes, but especially for climate, that feels very fear-driven and really leads people into apathy instead of action. And so we really looked at this as an opportunity to do something from a more positive and hopeful framework and a way that can actually inspire people to feel like they can make a difference. One of the things that I think about a lot is that the scope and the scale of climate is so large that as a single person, as a human, it can feel like trying to push a glacier if you're an ant. It's just like impossible, right? It doesn't seem fathomable. And I think there is some truth to the fact that this is going to have to be addressed at systems level from governments and institutions, not just people. But I think a lot of this does come down to people feeling apathetic about this. Like it's too late. We're too late. There's nothing that can be done. And so what's the point? And that's the exact wrong message that needs to be spread right now.
You're absolutely right. A lot of people I've spoken to have said, we've been hearing about this since the 70s. It's not a big deal. Nothing's going to change. What can I do? Which is why my tagline is no shaming, no blaming. Every little bit helps, because it is the little bits. But what I loved that you brought up was you can't put all the pressure on the individual. It has to be these large corporations. It has to be the government interaction. And if you could explain to people what that exactly means so they maybe have a little less pressure on them.
Yeah, and I don't mean that in a way that we shouldn't have some personal responsibility for our actions, that we shouldn't be thinking about how we can be more sustainably minded in how we travel and how we eat and how we act. But I think a lot of pressure and an outsized amount of pressure has been put on individual action when really collective action is going to be what solves this at the government level, at the institutional level, at the corporate level, because those entities have so much more influence over positive and negative effects with regards to climate change. And so a lot of money has actually been poured into that. It's not a coincidence. A lot of corporations have put money into really trying to reposition this issue on the individual and off of their shoulders. So I think we need to hold those corporations accountable. I think we need to hold our governments accountable, our politicians accountable, and stop talking about things and start doing things, and start acting like we're in a crisis, because we are, and not, feel like we're being constrained by the barriers that we put up for ourselves. There are ways to address these issues, and the technology exists, and there's more technologies that are being invented all the time. And so really what's missing more than anything is political will.
When you mentioned corporations pushing it up on the individual, just a couple days ago, the SEC did announce that they are going to be requiring companies to disclose their climate initiatives and their climate impacts. So kind of stopping the greenwashing we've been seeing. So that is a benefit. But with respect specifically to your company, 𝒂𝒏𝒈, how do you help people? What do you offer them to help them navigate these waters?
Well, I think our theory of change, so to speak, is that one of the missing pillars in this fight or this effort or this movement is on the communication side. That a lot of times folks working on these efforts are scientists, they're academics, but they're not communicators by training, they're not designers by training. And so we are not scientists or academics or politicians. We're a group of creatives, but we see a huge benefit to our work and our skill set in this space. And we're looking at, hey, how can we help? Because everyone needs to find a way to help and a way to chip in with their skill set and their expertise. So what we've seen with a lot of organizations, either movement-based or advocacy-based brands or more technological brands, is that they're so focused on their product or their movement or their idea, but they don't have the internal capacity or expertise around communication. And we see that as being a really important kind of linchpin in their success. So when communication and design is done effectively, it has the potential to be an impact multiplier. But if it's being done ineffectively or not to its full potential, it's actually holding organizations back much more than they sometimes realize. So what does that look like with clients? It really depends. We come at each new engagement or partnership from a framework of empathy and curiosity, and really trying to understand what are their goals, what's their desired future state, what are they working towards, where are they getting stuck, and how can our expertise around design and communications come in to help with some of that. So, it's loosely based around design thinking and human-centered design principles. That's our background as an agency and as individuals. And so we're taking those ideas, those frameworks, those philosophies, and applying it to social change.
I would imagine one of the hardest parts is actually just one, creating cohesive messaging, because as we all know, it depends upon where people are looking and where they're getting their information. So to try to get, I'm being very, very PC there.
You are so PC right now.
I'm not awake. I apologize. But it's like, but in all seriousness, to try to create a cohesive message that reaches the masses that are actually reading things and getting the same information, that's the hardest part. Because like I said, depending, like if you're on a social media account, depending on who you follow, the algorithms are giving you different messages about what's going on. And the vast majority of the messages, regardless of what you're following to, it is doom and gloom. Like we have X amount of time to stop warming before the world just goes to hell in a handbag. I mean, so it's like, so the messaging has literally just been, yeah, we're kind of screwed, versus just saying, no, let's actually do, this is what's happening and this is what we're trying to do. And I think that's the biggest challenge.
Yeah, you touch on a lot of good points there. I think we published a couple of years ago a manifesto for this work, not specifically for climate, but just around communications for social change. And the whole premise of our manifesto is really built on the attention economy that you're kind of alluding to. And because of largely social media and the internet and how free and flowing information has become, we have an abundance of information, but we have a new scarcity, which is basically attention, right? How can we capture people's attention? And how can we sustain that attention in a meaningful and skillful way? And unfortunately, what's happening with a lot of social networks is our attention is being hijacked and yanked around in multiple different directions, literally at the physiological level, right? It's not a coincidence this is happening. This is by design. And, I think there's potential for that to be leveraged for good. Unfortunately, that's not what's happening right now. So that, is a whole new set of issues. Actually, we've worked with some clients trying to mitigate those issues by training students to do this more skillfully. I'm thinking of Civic Online Reasoning, a program by Stanford that is really interesting. You should check out. They're bringing skillful internet usage to K through 12 students and building a free open curriculum that's backed by Stanford to basically train the next generation to not be duped by misinformation. Because if we can't get credible, authentic information, and if we stay in our information silos, then you see what happens. We become polarized, we can't find common ground, and nothing gets done. So I think it's not just about creating clear and concise messaging. That's hard enough, but it's also how do you cut through the noise and actually capture people's attention, because you need both. If you capture people's attention, but your message isn't clear, well, that's not so good. If you have a really clear message, but no one hears it, that doesn't really work either.
Because you really only have like 3 seconds right now. Like, I mean, we're at that point where it's, I mean, it really isn't that what the studies show? Like you have like just a few seconds to get your point across before we're moved on to the next thing.
Yeah, each study, it seems to be shorter and shorter. Yeah.
It's terrifying.
It is terrifying, because how can you get a message across in 3 seconds that's cohesive and understandable? Because you're really not. But one of the things I loved when you said that scientists, because I'm a hardcore scientist, and communication for me was very challenging, because I surrounded myself, in undergraduate and graduate work, and then also working as a scientist. We spoke in acronyms, we spoke in high-level jargon. Yeah. Dealing with the normal human population was difficult for me, and very difficult in the corporate world, because I'd be like, yeah, that of course you should understand science. Yeah. And so bridging that gap is hugely important, which is probably why Joel and I get along so well, because he's a communications guy.
But you know what's funny, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's like this actually goes back to what you were talking about, Eric. It's that it's all of us when we're focused on just our lane, we don't realize we can't communicate with people outside of that.
Yeah.
So it's like when you're coming from a science background, you're like, well, why don't you understand it? Well, I don't have that background, and I'm not surrounded by that bubble or living within that bubble. So to try to branch out to that, but to realize that is really hard to do, and how do you get people to adapt is even harder.
Adapting is difficult.
Yeah,
Yes.
behavior change is literally a science, right? And science communications is an entire field for that exact reason. So I think our experience, what really matters is that framework of empathy, really understanding who are you trying to reach and where are they coming from and what are their challenges, what are their obstacles, what are some inequities that might be at play that you want to be careful of not bringing your own bias into when you're doing this work. And so we spend a lot of time, interviewing people, asking questions, doing surveys, doing that research work before we start to prescribe design solutions or creative solutions that might make sense to us, but might not be effective for the different audiences that you're trying to reach. And so I think that, those are principles, again, of design thinking and human-centered design that really guide our work. And there's a reason why those frameworks are so popular, is because they actually allow you to ensure that you're designing the right solutions for the right people and that you have the right way of explaining them in a way that's meaningful and understandable to that different, segment or demographic.
Now, what made you want to go into this realm of design in this aspect?
Well, I mean, I've from a very young age always been very creatively inclined, just naturally drawn to art and media, and especially digital media. Yeah, so that's been just baked into my blood since a young age, and eventually I had to start to make money and and support myself. So started Cosmic about 12 years ago, and at the beginning we were really focused on just helping mostly B2C and B2B Silicon Valley brands. We were based in Santa Cruz, California, and pretty close to Silicon Valley, and kind of cut our teeth doing that work. But after about 7 years, we realized we needed to kind of niche in and find some kind of stake in the ground that we could really differentiate around. And we started looking at the work we'd done, and we'd done a lot of work in the social impact space as well, with some nonprofits, with some tech companies, with new innovative technologies that were working towards, social change. And we really realized that work felt the most meaningful to us, that we felt like there was a huge need for our expertise and our skill set in this niche. And so we basically put a stake in the ground, changed our positioning as an agency, and we've been fiercely committed to social change ever since.
See, I love that. Like, you just
Love
kind of
that
wake up and realize this is the person I want to be. It's not just about the buck. It's like, I mean, don't get me wrong, you've been around 12 years. I'm assuming you're doing pretty well. But I mean, to be able to like take that step back and realize I want to do good with my skill set, I think that's
Yeah.
huge for people. And kudos to you for, one, getting to the position where you could actually do that, but to also doing it. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, this was circa 2016, which was not a coincidence. Lots going on at that time in America. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think it hasn't been easy by any stretch of the imagination, and we've had to learn a lot, because it's different communicating and designing for social impact versus for profit. There's some overlap. There's some, basic best practices that we still leverage that we learned in the early days, but there's a lot that we've had to learn around the unique needs and challenges and the way that money flows, and how we can actually inspire action instead of sell products. So it is a different lens in which we approach the work, and it's been really fascinating to learn and to come in with a beginner's mind and start to see some trends and some patterns, and really develop an expertise as an agency around this work.
That's awesome. I like
Yeah.
that.
And what I love is you've also kind of brought up when people talk about shareholders versus stakeholders. Shareholders mean the people who invest in companies, who expect a profit, who expect that payback, whereas stakeholders, that's their community. Those are the people that are living and breathing and contributing to the society, and that's what you're focused on. And I'm actually seeing a lot more people kind of shift their mentality towards community-based and helping, which is exactly your leadership in that. You are leading the way with Cosmic doing that. So that is fantastic, and we thank you for that. So how can people find you? I'm sure you're everywhere. So tell them where they can find you.
Based
Yeah,
on
I
the
mean,
guitar background, I'm assuming he's playing at a coffee shop somewhere. Or like,
this is my home studio. Yeah.
That's
So
impressive.
I mean, the best place to find us and to dig in would be our website. Our website is designedbycosmic.com. And we have a lot of our work on there. You can see some of the work we've done with our clients, but we also publish a lot of free insights and resources. If you're a social impact organization or just someone who's really trying to create positive social change, a lot of our thinking is out there. We've done many podcasts and interviews and webinars similar to this one. So you can find those on our insights tab of our site. I mentioned the manifesto earlier. That's just at the top. There's a manifesto tab that kind of talks a little bit more around our philosophy of how we approach this work. So that's really the best place to start and to dig in. There's lots of free content there and, links to other content as well.
Oh, I
so
love that.
I have
Go
two
ahead,
more.
Joel.
I have two really quick questions for you, but kind of along the same lines. What has been your greatest achievement? Like if you look back, going, holy crap, we did this. And what's also been one where you look back and go, oh crap, I wish I would have done that one differently.
Oh, these are such gotcha questions. Okay, so
It's a question.
these were not in the show notes, by the way.
Joel's
So
going rogue.
I mean, like just to dig in a little bit more, I think the greatest achievement as an agency has been this repositioning and this commitment to social change. And it's actually the answer to both because it's still it's been quite challenging in terms of really having to reinvent the entire firm from the ground up in terms of how we hire, how we make decisions. So it's a huge repositioning, and we don't have venture funding. We're funded by doing client work and by consulting. So bridging that gap as a small company, we're about 9 people. You can't just put the brakes on everything and just say, okay, now we're social impact and, everyone else go away. Right. We've been working towards, we're at a point now though, where our client roster is, except for a few longtime clients that we want to continue to support, exclusively social impact. That's one of the main things that when people approach us, we're really digging into, what is your social impact? What is your potential for more impact? And really looking at things from that lens, and making sure that we can get behind what they're doing. And we've done that even before this positioning as an agency. We realized that if we can't support our clients from a more purpose-driven lens, then it's really hard for us to do the hard work and the creative work because our energy just isn't there as humans and as people. Other folks might be able to kind of like hold their nose and get through that and get paid. And I don't judge people. We need to make a living, and I don't want to put too much burden on individuals to fight back at their companies or whatever. But I think what we just noticed is just the energy level at our team is if we really got behind the work that our clients were doing, our work was better. The quality of it, the effectiveness of it, the experience of doing it. Right. I mean, this is logical stuff.
If you care.
Yeah, because we care. Yeah. And so, I mean, that continues to be the trend for us as we bring on social impact clients is like, if we feel like we can really make a meaningful difference in this work, that's going to incentivize our team to care more, to do better, to push harder in a way that's sustainable, in a way that's authentic. And so, to answer your original question, it's been the most challenging thing. The thing I would do over, I think if anything, I just would have started this sooner, right? I wish we'd started this way. Like that was the idea, but no regrets either. Cause we learned a lot of really good stuff in the early days too. And just being open and saying yes a lot was really helpful at the beginning.
That's a great answer.
That is a great answer.
See, it wasn't a gotcha. It was just a question.
No, it's a fair question. And, we thank you for coming and talking about Cosmic because I think what you're doing is changing the world. It's not just putting companies on the spot, but it's teaching them how to effectively communicate. And more people are paying attention to this. More people are realizing that this needs the attention and the impact of change. So we thank you and we thank Cosmic for coming today. So look up Eric Ressler. It's designedbycosmic.com. Did I get that right?
Yep.
Perfect. Look them up. Change the world. We'll talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye.